camera started before I was totally ready. I don't think I hit that button. This is live. This is recording the best you can when you don't even have everything figured out and planned out in advance, which is something I tend to do. And I have a feeling I'm not the only one. Do you ever try to figure it all out in advance and then your brain is extra busy and you don't do anything at all? Or you start getting extra stressed out because you don't have it all planned out in advance? Because only if you knew exactly how it was going to go and you knew exactly what the outcome was going to be, then maybe you would feel calm. Or is that just something that we tell ourselves because we really want it to be true? Huh. Sometimes that anxiety is already there and then it builds and it gets bigger and it becomes more intense over time when we are getting busier and busier, when we are trying to figure more things out, when we're relying on our own strength, in that we want to have things under control. We want to navigate it and do the right thing. It's not bad to want to do the right thing, is it? Is anybody going to tell you, no, if you want to do good things, that's a bad thing? No. But because of that desire to want to do good and right things, we can also be generating this ongoing sense of urgency to figure it out and to get it right in everything that we do, which is exhausting. So here I am, ironically starting off and completely imperfectly, like fixing my hair because I was noticing a piece that was sticking up in the beginning of this video. I am choosing to roll with that and rolling with the conversation, whether or not anyone shows up. Looks like maybe one person is here. I would love to say hi to you if you want to say hi to me and share anything that you're thinking of before I even go into the conversation on today's topic for today's live meetup, which is about reducing stress and overwhelm in these really busy seasons, and also how that can impact your relationships with other people. Oh, James is here from Michigan. Good to see you here. I remember the mitten. I remember the mitten. Okay. The reason I even thought of this particular topic today is because it's December. And of course, the busyness and the bustle of Christmas and holidays is something that a lot of us experience. I notice as a parent with adult kids now that I am enjoying and kind of just grieving some, but like noticing this transition between having all adult kids that don't expect me to go find a bazillion gifts and do all the things for Christmas. And so that's not on my plate this year. At the same time, that's a big transition. Oh, yes. And with WITHness, we're going to be talking about that today as well. And that actually is a really good point to bring up right now because when I was thinking about this particular topic in this season of December, I was also reminded that last Christmas, I went to an Advent service with a friend of mine. I had told her about how I grew up in the Lutheran church and we used to do Advent soup suppers and Lent soup suppers every Wednesday night. I looked forward to that so much. There would be these big crocks of soup with French bread and butter on it. And so we'd have the church service. And I grew up in Minnesota, so you got snow and cold and the soups. Anyway, it was a whole thing that was part of Christmas time for me. So I went to her service at a Lutheran church nearby, and they had a little soup supper. It was different, but it was brought back a lot of memories. While I was in that church, the banner that was up front was the picture of the word Emmanuel, God with us. That word comes up a lot at Christmas time. I love the Amy Grant song, Emmanuel. And the word Emmanuel, God with us, stood out to me in an extra powerful way last Christmas. Probably because I'd already been thinking so much about presence in church environments, presence with ourselves, which is going to come through in today's talk. And so it just really occurred to me this concept of withness. God sent his son to be with us in human form, his spirit to be with us with our spirit, to comfort, to convict, to guide. God provides this presence, His courage, discernment, wisdom, love, mercy, all the time. He's providing it. It is a withness available to us. And sometimes we miss that withness because of busyness. Sometimes that busyness leads to patterns in our lives that keep us from really being able to experience God's witness with us. So let's talk a little bit about what happens when you're constantly busy beyond maybe what's healthy for you. You probably already have some ideas. Like if you already have some ideas of what happens when you're constantly busy, go ahead and put it in the chat, in the comments below, because I'm sure anybody listening to this, or many of you listening to this, probably have some idea. You feel tired. You get exhausted. Maybe your head is spinning with all kinds of thoughts, or maybe it's foggy and you can't have any thoughts. You have increased levels of frustration, irritation. You might even have additional thoughts of judgment. And those judgments can be about yourself. Oh, how could you do that? What is wrong with you? Or more thoughts of judgment of other people. I can't believe they thought that. What's wrong with them? Or judgments about situations, like this kind of assumption and expectation. Well, I'm not doing that because that is whatever. Um, but kind of more in this judgmental tone that is uh, like includes that frustration and irritation. You might also experience increased anger or sadness. You might notice an edge to your voice. That's kind of what I was alluding to just a moment ago. Like, I'm not going to do that. It kind of has an edge to it. There's a sense of bitterness, like perceiving a lot of things around you that are negative or against you in some way. And that's exhausting. It's an exhausting place to be in. There's some practical things that can happen when we're super busy, stressed, and overwhelmed. We start missing important things more than usual. Some of us are missing it just because it's hard to keep it organized in our brain or um, getting older, whatever. But you start missing more things and you notice yourself kind of letting too many things slip. For myself, I notice that things get cluttered around me because I'm not taking the time to think through it when I've been really, really busy. And so if I keep letting that go, then it becomes even more of an issue. I'm actually pulling back in some of the things that I'm doing right now because my digital clutter has gotten to be too cumbersome to manage all the things that I want to do. And so I'm reshaping, cleaning up, reshaping processes, etc. From seasons of busyness. And you just might even notice that you just don't have much tolerance for a change of plans or for a decision, something that somebody says that maybe that they say something, they make an offhand comment. It's not actually about you, but it feels more personal. And that's not the way that you would normally respond to something like that. That can be a sign that something else is going on. The thing is that when we're really busy and we're in these seasons of stress, we're kind of experiencing distress inside, but we're not paying attention to it. And the more we don't pay attention to the distress, the underlying needs, and the realities of our own capacities and limitations, the realities of what's happening as a result of all the busyness and stress, we become disconnected to ourselves. And here's the thing, a lot of us have learned to disconnect from who we are and what's going on inside of us for a long time. It started before a stressful busy season. And it can actually even be one of those fuels that adds to feeling more stress and distress. Because when we're not connected to ourselves, we're denying things that we really need or that maybe need attention. For example, I talk about emotions and I talk about feelings, and I've done a video, my thoughts on fear, people saying fear is a liar. I disagree, but I explain why and how I have a different perspective on it, and also how I think that's helpful for some people. Because in general, emotions are signals and they're designed to move us into action of some kind. When we have anger, there's generally some kind of an injustice. It may be a perceived injustice or a real injustice. It may be an injustice that needs to be um, have some action taken on it. There's all kinds of nuances on that, and I don't want to get into all of that right now. But we want to do something. Like the anger wants us to do something. We end up doing things that sometimes aren't helpful for us and can be harmful for the other people, but it's driving us to action. The sadness is also driving us to action because the sadness is revealing, um, hurts and wounds that need attention, loneliness that needs attention. And God has a way to meet those by offering comfort from someone else. This is an example of Emmanuel, God with us, the withness of God, when we experience comfort from one another, as scripture says. Comfort one another as you have been comforted. Mourn with those who mourn. Rejoice with those who rejoice. These are examples of God showing his witness through the people that he's created. But when we're constantly disconnected from ourselves and we've learned to deny that there's anything that even needs attention, we don't have a path for those needs to be met because we're basically saying they're not there. When you're constantly busy, stressed, and overwhelmed, you are likely not acknowledging that you even have needs, not acknowledging your capacities, or just ignoring the capacities and limits, and um, constantly motivated to do more, to give and give and give when you really don't even have it. It can get to that place where you're so depleted. I'll give the example of myself. If you've heard some of my story with the ranch where we fostered and we had up to 12 kids with us at the time, it was 14 months and we moved back home. The whole experience, it was over a decade ago. The whole experience was so beyond what I felt I had to give. And God definitely strengthened me and provided along the way and stretched me and molded me. But there is a point that it was well beyond that. And there literally just was not anything else to give. The point when things started to really change for me was when I recognized I literally cannot do or give anymore. I cannot say yes when I actually don't want to say yes. Because I just can't even. And that was a breaking point. There's there's time for shifts and change before that where we can start paying attention to what's happening so that we can make a change. Um, but let me go into the patterns of things that keep us like, okay, in my newsletter, I mentioned that we may have learned patterns that make the stressful and overwhelming situations even more stress filled, that may increase anxiety and irritation and frustration. And this has to do with kind of this concept that I'm talking about with not identifying what you need and being disconnected from yourself. Let me give you an example of how this can play out for some people from an early age. We talk about this concept of attachment or bonding in this is psychological term research. There's lots of research on attachment and attachment styles based on all kinds of things that happen in childhood and also situations later. But the primary focus of all the research is on childhood, where the bonding is critical and vital for the way our brain is developing and for how our nervous system is regulating and learning how to self-regulate when needed. When a parent or caregiver is not able to um, help our nervous system regulate or meet us in that space where we're scared, hungry, sad, angry, where it starts feeling unsafe in the body. Your brain might even know it. I mean, as your kid, you're not thinking, "Oh my gosh, my mom's not safe," but you're feeling it. You're feeling that fear that can build up in the body. And sometimes, in addition to that, this message starts to pervade that your needs don't matter. You're crying because you're hungry or scared or wet, whatever it is, as a baby. But when the need isn't met, and then add on to that, the caregiver's highly anxious or they're upset, and this happens for a lot of us in parenting. I mean, I missed cues with my kids a lot. So I'm not talking about just necessarily like abusive and neglectful environments. I'm talking about even times where there's miscues or there's a lot of stress in the family, and so there's missed opportunities for a child. Everybody's sensitivity levels are different. But when those needs are not met, and then continually hearing this message that you shouldn't be crying, you should not be sad or angry, and anger is not okay, or why are you upset about this? Um, how can you have that kind of an opinion? Like discounting. So as you're getting older and messages are coming your way, maybe it's from caregivers, maybe it's from peers, maybe it's other leaders in your life, a teacher, pastor, etc., constantly discounting your own thoughts, who you are as a person. You could start to discount that for yourself. My needs don't really matter. Or because nobody's actually meeting my needs, I'm just going to make sure that everybody else's needs are met. And then you're learning a pattern to deny the very thing that will help bring calm to your soul. Because if you're able to attend that, you might notice, for example, you know what? I have been out every night serving other people. I haven't taken any time to relax or to do anything that I enjoy. I'm starting to get short and quick with other people. I'm having a lot of thoughts that are negative, and I'm going into bitter places in my thoughts when I think about another person. And if I'm not paying attention to that, then I keep trying and I keep having these reactions. But by paying attention to it and connecting to the fact that this is happening, then I can also check in and say, wow, what is it I need? Because, and I, when I say this question about what is it that I need, or I ask other people, what do you need? I find it a little tricky because our tendency, especially when we've discounted ourselves and we're focused on other people, so the tendency is what I need is for someone else to do something or to stop doing something. But that's not your need. So, in this disconnection and denial and dismissiveness of ourselves, we um, lost my train of thought there for a second. So, in this disconnection, we don't know what we actually need. And can be really challenging to identify that and then to identify healthy ways for those needs to get met. I'm not talking about all the wants and very self-focused, all self-centered talk about, well, that's what I need. You're out of luck because this is what I need. That's different because we're starting with identifying what the need is or what's happening. That's actually what I do with the Unleash sheets. Is the process starts with, well, what's happening? So we start with the facts. So over time, as you're using this process and you're observing patterns or dynamics of what is happening. So for example, in the example that I just gave, I am out every night. Okay, I'm giving to other people. I did this, this, and this. So I'm listing out some things that are happening, and then and these thoughts are happening. So the next step in Unleash is, these are my thoughts. I'm thinking, man, this person is no. You write that down. Or I can't believe I did this. I messed up again. I write that down. That's a thought that I'm having. I'm feeling exhausted and burnt out. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling bitter, etc. So the process is going through these three things in Unleash sheets and then bringing it before God and asking the Spirit to reveal what He wants to reveal: comfort, conviction, courage, whatever it is that God has for you. But in the connecting to that, and the more that we check in and connect to what's going on, it's going to start revealing what those needs are. So in that example, I have a need to set some limits. I would have a need to rest. So maybe the need is to set limits because I'm the one that kept offering, and I really shouldn't be. I want to be a better manager of my time. I want to steward my time well. I want to steward my energy well, and so I have a need to work on the courage to have. I need to have the courage to say no, or to set the limits, to honor my own limits, etc. And the need may also just be, I need a break. And I want to be able to do all these other things. These are things that I chose to do and I want to do. And the reality is, I just can't. So I need a break that refuels me so that I can do this, so that I have the energy, the capacity, and that I can do it with a grateful heart. You know, the scriptures that talk, it's a scripture, God loves a cheerful giver. Like, when I think of that, it's this identification of God just embracing when we can give from a cheerful place. And that's also a place that has some capacity to give. It's not always the case, and there's plenty of room for, giving beyond what we feel like we have to give, and God showing up and strengthening us beyond that, etc. At the same time, when you're seeing a pattern, like when I talked about with Unleash Sheets, you can start to identify patterns in your life, and that brings on awareness. Oh, wait a minute. I'm consistently doing this. This keeps happening. So maybe it's not just me going outside of my comfort zone. Maybe it's not just, maybe it's more than giving because I want to. Maybe it's because I'm compelled to, and I don't feel okay not doing it. I feel anxious when I'm not giving. I don't feel okay with myself. I'm feeling judged and shamed. That is connecting to what's going on inside of you and getting more insight as to what the motivation is and what the need is. And as that continues, those layers continue to unravel, you might notice, what I need is to feel okay when I mess up, or when I say no. And that need getting met could look like saying no to someone else, and they say, "Oh, that's okay. I totally understand. Don't worry about it." Okay, I realize that I could say no and I can make it through. Or it could look like letting a friend know I'm struggling to say no in this area, and I feel a lot of shame and guilt when I do. And that friend or a counselor or coach or someone else accepts you, even if that no isn't like the answer that you wanted to give, it's just the only answer that you had to give in the moment. They accept you for the shame and the guilt that you're experiencing because of the person you are, who God created you to be. When they can hold space to see God's vision in you when you can't see it for yourself, and the nervous system can start to take that in and say, whew, it feels really difficult when that shame comes up. I do not like this at all. Thank you. If you can verbalize it or even just acknowledge it inside yourself, thank you for accepting me with my mistakes. And I say it like that because I've seen this pattern play out so many different times, that the shame and the guilt come up And it's so not only difficult to ask another person to be with you in that, to accept you, or to even have those moments when someone just offers it to you, it's difficult to receive it when it's offered. It's difficult to stay connected to the discomfort of receiving the good thing someone else is offering you. Okay, I want to pause for a second and just check and see if you guys have any questions or any thoughts. I know sometimes I have like all this information in my head, and I really am trying to keep with specific points, but I can get off track, and I'd like to know if it sounds confusing or helpful, or if you're noticing anything in yourself that resonates with this, that says, man, yeah, I'm noticing a pattern. Maybe it's not the same pattern that I played out with example, but there's something going on inside. I don't know what that is yet. I haven't been connected to what my thoughts and my feelings are, and I'm feeling disconnected from God and from other people. um, so I'm going to move into the next point. What fuels added stress? So you've developed a pattern of kind of coping with stress. Actually, before I go to that, what fuels the added stress, I wanted to make one more point about how these patterns develop. Because in some home environments, one of the attachment styles is called the chaotic attachment style. And the chaotic attachment style, or what's the other? Chaotic is a term that I think it's the Yurkoviches use, and some different people take the research terms and use different terms when they're talking about attachment styles. But what I'm thinking of is a dynamic where there was just chaos in the home. So maybe parents getting divorced, or you live in an unsafe neighborhood, or something unsafe happened in the home, and or there's a lot of yelling, there's a lot of tension, etc. And when you're learning this, like, I don't matter, I'm going to take care of other people's needs, you can also move into a place where you feel best, even though you don't feel good, but it's most comfortable and familiar to stay in stress, to respond and to stay engaged when things are chaotic and stress filled and overwhelming. And it's like your body and your brain don't know how to pause, and it doesn't feel okay to pause. That's understandable, because that is what your nervous system learned, is what your brain learned. It's this pattern that kind of built up over time, and it's probably not serving you well, because long-term stress has an impact on us. So let me pause for a second. James says, I realize he's in a period of recovery for self for a lot of these feelings and tension. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you adding your thoughts here, James. The whole thing about, um, I get really excited when I hear like James share these comments saying, I'm in a period of recovery for myself. I'm learning some new things, and I'm leaning into that and growing. So one, I acknowledge it is not easy. It is hard work. It is challenging work. It takes like courage and stamina. You know, God can bring that renewed energy consistently, but it's just not an easy process. So I acknowledge and honor that that is a challenging process. And I get excited about it because I'm also excited about what that means for you and other people around you in your future, and what that could mean even in your body. It affects our relationships, it affects our body, the stress and overwhelm over time. And let me go back just into the fuels that add to stress. So going back to this, the concept of the chaotic environment, and then always feeling like I have to either fix, or I actually do better. Even though I don't like it when people are yelling, for example, or uh, angry with me, or etc. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to thrive in that place? And they don't look like they're enjoying it, but for some reason they keep instigating it, or they seem to just, I don't know, like something is energized inside of them. This nervous system just doesn't know how to deal with a different pattern where they're slowing down and checking in with themselves. And so it's going to take a lot of time to rebuild uh, the brain networks and to also let things settle. And we can always pray for the Spirit's guidance to show up, for God to reveal in our spirits when we're going in this really high strung pace, and God's inviting us into a place of slowing down, inviting us into a place of hearing and receiving from Him. And we can also identify ways that God has already shown us to help our nervous systems reset, to help our minds rewire, and be able to be in that place that a part of us actually wants. So when some people will say, I don't want it to be chaotic and stressful all the time, and yet that's what keeps playing out. And when they work on slowing the nervous system down or allowing space just to be and sitting in that tension a little bit that doesn't feel comfortable, where things are not perfect, where they're not exactly as they want it to be, they experience a shift. And I lost my train of thought again. That's where they go sometimes, just right out the window. Okay, enough of that. We're going to roll with that too, because that's what my brain does sometimes. I can go in a roll and then the point that I started with disappears. So let's go back to the point that I wrote down, which is fuels that add stress in those situations. Our expectations add a lot of stress. A lot of stress. When those expectations, um, when they're frequent, we can apply them to ourselves. When when they're not met and we feel more anger or even sadness, like, oh man, they didn't do that, they should have done that, and I'm so hurt now because they didn't do the thing that I expected them to do, that's causing us some distress. So those expectations can show up for what we expect of ourselves. Maybe it's perfection, maybe it's energy levels and capacity. Maybe we expect that we should be able to do X, Y, and Z, and we're just so worn out, we don't have it to give. Maybe we expect ourselves to do it with a cheerful look, but because we're disconnected, we don't really realize that we don't have the capacity for that. And so we need something different. Um, we can also expect other people to do a lot of other things and for it to look a very specific way. We expect God to do things a certain way. We expect us to do one thing, God to do the next, and the outcome to be a certain way. The more those expectations build up, the more we have, the more likely you're going to feel added stress. When things are already busy and you have an expectation of it all playing out just this way, the more tightly you hold that expectation and the more of them, it's just like putting all these weights and chains on you saying, no, 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 I have to have it this way. Oh, wait, this didn't happen. And now I got to fix this. Spinning you in circles and cycles of thoughts and draining energy internally. When we are able to move into a place of holding those expectations, saying, this is what I want, this is what I'm hoping is happening. I also acknowledge it may not play out that way. You are able to come from a perspective that has more room to give when it doesn't play out the way you want it to. Another thing that adds fuel to increase stress and overwhelm is what I talked about before, denying of yourself. Not knowing your own needs and wants, not being able to identify what those are, not being okay with having them, and not developing yourself, who you are as God's creation. Before a season gets extra busy, you can pause and start checking in to notice, what do I need? What do I want? How does this impact me that I want this? Because it can feel like it's not okay to want anything because you should only want what's absolutely critical, okay? Um, or I want a lot. Maybe I'm actually moving towards expectations that aren't realistic because I want too much and I want it now. So just exploring, what are they? What does it look like? How's this showing up? Am I okay with it? And is it honoring to, well, I don't want to get into that. It's a whole side topic. I got like a bazillion thoughts that just happened at the same time. So, denial of self, that pattern you might have learned from childhood and continuing to play out as an adult, can fuel more and more stress. Can you see how that plays out? Can you see how that denial of self can, because you start ending up saying yes to more things than you want to say yes to. You believe that someone else is expecting you to do something that maybe they don't actually expect. They may have asked you, you assume that they expected of you, so you do it instead of saying, actually, I already agreed to do this, and because you want to honor your commitments, I'm not able to do that. And so because you're not connected to yourself and you these assumptions are happening, you don't say no when that person might have been just fine with it. And can you see how that can just cause ruptures in relationships too? By not being connected to ourselves and not knowing what we need, we're adding more stress to ourselves, and then it can be adding stress to the relationship because we have these assumptions, these thoughts of what someone else expects of us. We're trying to play all this out when it's actually not the truth, because we haven't actually given the other person the opportunity to clarify, or to have two people mutually talking back and forth about what they are choosing, or what they actually need, and getting clarification on it. And by not connecting to ourselves, we just don't even know that we are extra stressed until we're really extra stressed, or that anger is building up until it explodes sometimes, or that sadness is building up until we start feeling depressed. So we can connect before that happens. Another fuel that adds stress, this is the way I put it: external forces versus internal choices. If you've ever felt compelled to do a bunch of things because someone else said they thought you should do it, or this is the way that if you do this you're going to get X, and if that is what has been driving you, that is solely external. On the other hand, if you hear someone say this is what they think you should do, or the way they think you will get X, and you operate from a place of internal choice, you can reflect. You can identify if that's something that aligns with your values. Are you choosing to do it? Does it kind of fit with other choices that you're making? But there's a lot of questions that could go in there. But from this place, this internal choices place, is a grounding core connection to the reality of how the state of your soul, the state of your physical being, your capacities, your limits, your giftings, your strengths, etc. And it's more grounding. When we're grounded, that helps our nervous system experience peace as well. Even when things are really busy, it could still experience peace in the midst of the storm, if you will, versus the external forces. That's like all this pressure constantly. Okay, now I'm not making any choices. That's going to increase bitterness. It's going to increase anger. It's going to increase frustration because it feels out of my control. So now I'm hyper managing and trying to control everybody else or control myself because I'm feeling like everybody else is controlling me. Coming back into here and connecting to what's actually going on. What do I need? Bringing it before God and asking Him to speak to our hearts in those spaces, allowing space for the emotions that are there, refueling ourselves in the way that energizes us, introverts and extroverts. I refuel by checking out with a puzzle or a coloring book, or just reading or something that's quiet and by myself most of the time. Not always. I refuel also with other people, but differently than my husband does, who's very extroverted and refuels a lot when he's around other people. When I don't take any time for that, and I'm feeling like everybody is telling me what to do and everybody's pressure and expectations are on me, I'm starting to kind of just feel like I'm literally doing this with my body right now, like where it's starting to feel like I'm caving in and I'm going to explode. I'm probably going to explode. I'm not feeling in control, or I'm going to be trying to manage everything. I see that play out a lot too. So, the vital tip around this whole topic to reset from too much stress is connecting to you. There is space for you. God didn't design you with the eye. Oh, what is the apple? There's a verse, not like the apple of my eyes. That's not a scriptural thing, but the way that God sees us with love, like His creation, His design. He sees you with love, with fondness, with a vision, and there's space for you. When we're constantly pouring out and giving, and we're allowing everything else to shape what we do without connecting to us at all, we're actually dishonoring God's design in us and God's invitation to meet us where we are, God's invitation to join us, to give us the courage that we need, to give us wisdom and discernment, because it's kind of like we're bringing it all back into ourselves to say, no, I got this. So the vital tip is connecting to ourselves. How do we do this? How do we do this in such a way? In last week's topic, we talked about, is it selfishness, self-protection, or self-stewardship? How can we connect to ourselves without it being all about us? There's a fear that I think a lot of Christians experience, which is, I can't focus on myself because I'm going to be selfish. It's just pride, and that's arrogant. I shouldn't be doing that. And if God has also designed each of us and each of us to be in relationship with each other, we have to have some connection to ourselves, or we don't even know what we're connecting to or offering in connection. We don't even know what our gifts are. We never explore our gifts. How's anybody else going to see that and benefit from it? Because we're ignoring it and denying it and saying that we should only allow other people to use their gifts. My gifts don't matter. Well, wait a minute. If God sees a design in you that your gifts matter, there's a purpose and a vision in that. Maybe big, maybe small, it doesn't even really matter. It's the fact that He put that design in you to have an impact in this world. And it impacts you too, just exploring and using your gifts. There is space. And the way that I like to look at it that helps me kind of stay grounded is, I want to be bold, calm, and confident in who I am while remaining humble. I could be wrong. I may not have the right perspective. I want to be able to move forward, even if I get it wrong, and um, not learn from, but like if there's consequences from getting it wrong, I believe God's going to be with me in that and help me accept it. If it means that maybe I said something and that affected another person, and what I said was really based out of more self-protection or selfishness, then I want to be able to say, you know what, that was rude of me, and that impacted you. Like, that's a consequence in a sense, that I want to be able to own it and steward that, because that is still my responsibility. So this boldness and this humility coming together to honor God's design in me and honor God's design in another person. I'm responsible for me. They're responsible for them. We are also responsible to each other in relationship. It can take a long time to identify what that really looks like, and to navigate and understand what does belong to me versus what belongs to someone else, and how am I honoring another person when I say no, when I speak the truth in love, etc. How can we do that? When we're stewarding the life that God has given us, what belongs to us, our thoughts, our choices, our actions, our gifts, our attitudes, our um, beliefs, our experiences that affect how we live, that affect how we're settled in our spirits. When we're stewarding that, we're managing what's ours to manage. And if we are getting into a place where it's just about ourselves, that's not stewardship. That is self-centered focusing that um, keeps us isolated, right? Keeps us disconnected from other people and is not actually honoring to the way that God wired us, because we have things to share with others. There's a mutual relationship design in mankind. Not with everybody, we can't be friends with everybody, that kind of thing, but this design in us to be relational is after God, with the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in creation, saying, let us make mankind in our image. Relational God, relational mankind. In order to get there, sometimes we do have to pull back from other people, in the sense that we have to first be able to identify what is going on inside of us. How am I responding? What are my patterns? What's happening inside my body right now? Reflecting and connecting to what's going on, and then asking God to meet you there. So there can be this pulling back to gain clarification on you and what's going on, so that you have the capacity to meet with others the way that God designed. And this Christmas season, this December, noticing the word Emmanuel, of God with us, and this withness of God, we can engage in this process with God, who invites us to experience rest with Him, who invites us into a place of even being convicted. Sometimes we do need to turn away from the things that we've been doing. They haven't been helping us or helping other people. It may be a direct thing to another person, or an activity that we can easily identify as something that we need to turn away from. But one of the more difficult things can be, I actually need to turn away from giving so much to others when I don't have it to give. I need to lean into, why is this happening? And what is it that's motivating me to do this all the time? What am I trying to fix? The reason I ask that question is because sometimes the desire to help other people may not even actually be about you. And that isn't stewarding you. It may be about them. Serving other people may not actually be about them, but about a need inside of yourself that isn't getting met. And so it's trying to be met in an unhealthy way. That underlying need to be seen, to be valued, to know that you have worth, that you have a place in this world. And the way that you feel that is by giving and giving and giving, then that's actually not honoring yourself or the other person. It's trying to get something. That can be a really hard thing to face too. Um, so this getting connected to ourselves can start with just a simple pause, checking in. What's happening? This pattern that goes through on these sheets. What is it that's happening? What am I noticing in my body, my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions? What's the pattern? Noticing the messages that are coming through, either because you've heard it before from other people, or so those words that you keep saying back to yourself, if the enemy keeps speaking to you. What are those different messages? What do they sound like? And what are they saying about you? What kind of expectation and external force is being pushed on you because of these extra messages or these past experiences that you've had? So that pause, checking in to notice what is going on. What is the impact of all of this? If like you might even start with an awareness like of the impact that's like I'm just exhausted. I'm yelling at my kids, I'm yelling at my coworkers, I'm yelling at my friends, or I'm get off with my good friend and all I can think of is horrible thoughts. I mean, that's not me. That's not the kind of thoughts that I want to have. If you start noticing those things, it's a sign to check in. What else is going on? What is prompting it, and what do you need? So I'm going to pause there. I'm hoping that this is helpful. And it's always a little tricky for me when I'm talking about these topics about self, partially because I wasn't okay for the longest time with just having any thoughts about developing myself. It always felt too prideful. It felt like maybe I was just following the footsteps of others. And that actually kind of leads to like a self-martyr place, or a place of, trying to manage things that are just adding so much extra stress, because um, instead of developing myself and and feeling that guilt and shame all the time, then I'm trying to fix the guilt and shame in other ways, and it's not working because what's really needed is developing me. I didn't understand that until Jesus. I sense Jesus saying, I've given you what you need. Now walk in it. Whew, what a challenging call and some challenging things to face. But if God is convicting you of something that does need to change, He's going to give you the courage to work to continue that path. He's going to be with you in the process. There's grace and space for that messy process. And sometimes we mishear the messages that are telling us that we're just failing and we're messing up, and that we need to change because we should, because we have to. Those might be those external forces of past experiences, other people's expectations that we're trying to lean into, which can keep us disconnected. So, yeah, so James, it sounds like this message may be resonating. Um, and I do want to highlight that, like I said, it's always a little tricky for me in talking about this, because um, when I think about, could my motives be selfish for another person, I don't want that to be a one more shame-filled perspective. I messed up because now I'm being selfish and it's all about me, and that's a problem, the shame. I'm looking for just kind of identification of patterns. Wow, is it about this or is it something else? I don't want it to be this way. So what other choices can I make? It's a lot easier for me to say that than for some of us to experience. So I don't know if this is your experience or if anybody else has experienced that, but sometimes we can move into these shifts of changing some things up in our lives that are still all about fixing it and making it right and better. And my hope and prayer is that we're leaning into a process, that grace-filled process and space with God, that responds to the Spirit, responds to God at work in each of us. So that's, sometimes it's the comfort, sometimes it's courage and conviction. It shows up in different ways. That's my hope and prayer for you, for me, as we all continue to grow and we're in process and leaning into these opportunities of experiencing more peaceful soul with God, and Emmanuel, God with us, His withness this busy season. Take care. See you guys next week.